are excited to be here today with none other than Victoria Cowart from PetScreening.com. Victoria is teacher to the stars of property management, and full of witty puns, which I am so excited about because I'm gonna jump on that bandwagon for sure. But I am Darcy Alcaspero, co-founder of the Landlord Code, co-creator of the Mailbox Money Method, and co-founder of local property management company Foundation Homes Property Management, if you happen to be based in Marin County, California. So today, get out your pen and paper, get out your meow-tastic writing utensils. I don't know if I did that pun right. Yeah, you can let me know. And without further ado, we would like to go ahead and turn the floor over to Miss Victoria.
Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, what an introduction. I'm going to run amok with the puns. I'm going to start by giving you 2 paws up. When you get to 5 paws, I don't know how to do that, but that's a really great number to have. So thank you for having me.
Life goals, right?
Yes, there you go. Thank you for having me. Hopefully one of my creatures with paws will not run across the screen while we're here together today. But if that happens, I'm told it's good luck and it's kitty blessings. So we're just going to put that out there now just in case.
Awesome.
So thank you again for having me. What a great setup. What a great organization. I mean, Lady Boss, thank you very much. I'm so impressed. And thank you to Sheila, who's helping run everything behind the scenes. We love our backbones behind us and we appreciate them very, very much. I'm Victoria Cowart. As we said earlier, the introduction earlier, I've enjoyed a career in property management. I've managed apartment communities, mobile home communities. When I wanted a little torture session, HOA communities. And at times, yes, Lord. And at times, portfolios of this, all of the above. So multiple apartment communities, multiple mobile home communities, multiple HOAs. So, and as you heard my accent, I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. So that's where I'm calling in from. And I've been having classes like these and sessions like these, hosting these all across the country. So I am so pleased to be with you all today. I have a strong leaning towards all things education and legislation. I've been an operator for many, many decades in the industry, but while doing all that, I kind of started sidelining in education. I teach property management licensing here in South Carolina, and I'm this year's National Apartment Association legislative chairperson. So I'm really interested in all things legislation and education, and those things really come together well in a session like this. So when I teach at the Realtors, I'm there from 6 o'clock at night till 10 o'clock at night. So you know that means I'm in it for the love of it, and I enjoy sharing knowledge and helping people's light bulbs go off. So I hope that today is that kind of event for you. This is an amazing industry, though, whatever properties you serve, with incredible servant leaders. And I'm excited to be here with you today. I want to share with you for just a moment before we get into the meat of this, a mindset that I want to get you in. I'd like to ask everybody, I know we're inundated with these assistance animal accommodation requests, and I know how many of us feel about them. But I want to ask you to take a step back from that, have a little pause in your thought process, and write down the name of a disabled person, friend or family member, someone you know, care for, and ponder them today while we're talking, because I want to give us a step back today and give us an opportunity to drill back into our empathy and our grace on this topic as we get more confident and informed about it. I think you'll be able to do that as an end result. That's my goal for you. I want to encourage you to take notes while we're talking together today. If you only listen while I talk, you'll only retain 20%, which means you will offload 80%. And if you get a HUD complaint, you'll want the bulk of that 80% you've lost. And speaking of that HUD complaint, what you're doing here today is so valuable. I congratulate you. If you are on the front lines of this industry, you and anyone around you on the front lines of this industry communicating with residents or prospective residents, you are betting the house. You've heard that expression, betting the house. You're betting the house on your understanding of this topic. In fact, you're betting your house. Because when those HUD complaints come in, if you've been the one working with that prospective client or client, that resident or prospective resident, your name will be on the HUD complaint. And if that HUD complaint is not resolved, your name could be on the HUD lawsuit, which means you and your personal assets can be drawn into the situation. And there goes your time and treasure. So don't bet the house. Understand what we're doing today. Take notes, listen, Ask questions. The minute you think of a question you would like an answer to, even if you're not sure, we'll cover it later, put it in the Q&A. And I'm sure Darcy will moderate that Q&A accordingly. And at the end, we'll have all those questions to go through, because if you wait till the end, we'll hear crickets when we ask for questions, because people are like, I had so many, where'd they go? So ask them as you think them, take notes, and listen. Do all of the above. That will multiply your retention 4 times over. You'll go from losing 80% to retaining 80%. And retention is where it's at with this topic, because it is so critically important to your joy in your work and your time and your treasure that you and your family work to put up for your futures. Okay, so that's everything. So with that, we'll be talking about what matters today. We'll be talking about some statistics. We'll talk about the who, the what, and the HUD part. And I'm going to get rolling. And this is going to be fast-paced but informative. And Darcy, do we have anything to touch on? Any housekeeping before we move forward?
Yeah, I think we covered the housekeeping with the Q&A. Whether you're watching us on Zoom or Facebook, the same applies. As the question comes up, go ahead and pop it in the chat. We are doing a screen share here today. Now, for anyone who would like to follow along, we do have a download, a workbook provided to you folks watching, compliments of our friends here at Pet Screening. Sheila, if you don't mind throwing that link up both in the Zoom chat and in the Facebook chat. And for anyone listening along later on the podcast, we'll go ahead and include that link in the show notes. This is a 47-page workbook download. You can follow along as we go, but it also includes the slides that you're going to see today. So if we're going through it too quickly and you really wish you had time, you're trying to do those screenshot grabs, don't worry about it. We've got the download for you. So we can go ahead and throw up that link for you as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Darcy. I appreciate that. So assistance animals, is it a rough task, right? These can be rough conversations. They can be difficult. So let's give you all some knowledge and confidence and let you access your grace in this topic. Let's move along. So we're going to start by talking about the human and animal statistics. We're going to give you kind of the numbers as to where this is coming from and why it's so important at this time. Then I'll work to build some framework around this picture for you. But let's start with the human side. We have nearly 13% of the American population living with one or more disabilities. Nearly 41 million non-institutionalized civilian members of the United States population, nearly 13% living with a disability, whether it's vision, hearing, cognitive, or ambulatory. If you're thinking about your portfolios, let's say you have 250 homes you manage, that means you've got 32 of those homes housing disabled household members. Think about this in terms of you and your portfolio. Thinking about this around the country, oddly, we have states that range from 9 or 10% to states of almost 19% when you look at that, Utah and West Virginia. There's a lot of disabled individuals in this community. There are a lot of disabled individuals in this country, rather, and they have needs related to their housing and their ability to use and enjoy their housing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about the furry side of this conversation as well. Across the country, 4 years ago, at NAA's Apartmentalize, we heard 63% of American households had pets or animals. I recently read a statistic that said we are far more likely to have pets in our households than children. Households with children are 27%. So there's a lot of furry family members out there in the country and in your housing. So 60% at least of your portfolios. Again, if you've got that 250 unit portfolio, that means 150 houses have pets or animals. And in those, 91% are actually pets. So 137 out of 250 households would have pets, and at least 13 would have assistance animals. But we find that there are many more people trying to avail themselves of the rights of the disabled than truly are entitled to them. So you may find that you have many more than 13 out of 250. But again, 60% of households at least are going to have pets or animals. 91% of those are going to truly be pets, and 9% are truly going to be assistance animals. So what else is happening in this with regard to this in the industry? Well, there's a 61% increase in requests for reasonable accommodations for the disabled. 61%. What we find, though, at PetScreening, when we do our work in over 2 million rental units across the country, is that only 4 out of 10 of these assistance animal requests actually make it across the line and receive our recommendation. The others either kind of go silent or they receive a not recommended, if you will. So we have a yes that something is recommended as an assistance animal or no that it is not. So again, only 40% are receiving the yes. Let's talk a little bit about the framework for our conversation now that we've gotten through the statistics and talk about the fair housing background information. I'm not going to go deep dive into this, just a couple of slides, but enough to make sure that you understand where this relates to the bulk of the fair housing conversation. So we've got 3 pieces of legislation to really think about when we think about this topic today of assistance animals. We've got the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The supporters of that act passed that with President Lyndon Johnson, and it was sweeping. And it was amazing. And then 1968 came, and there was an update and an expansion to that landmark legislation. In 1968, they added Title VIII, which became known as the Fair Housing Act. So with that, we ended up with federally protected classes. Then come 1988, though, and we had the Fair Housing Amendments Act, and we ended up with 2 more protected classes. So I like to remind myself or recall these as, and help others recall these as, if you're looking at the screen, residents can now really sue for discrimination. And that's all 7 of your federally protected classes. And those are protected classes, which means that discrimination is prohibited against these members of these classes in the sale, rental, or financing of housing. Again, residents can now really sue for discrimination. Those are your 7. Now, the Fair Housing Act makes it unlawful for a housing provider to refuse to make a reasonable accommodation that a person with a disability might need to have a better chance to use and enjoy your rental property. It's a helpmate. It kind of bridges the gap in the ability. So you've got a disabled person whose ability to use and enjoy your rental property might be here, and then you've got a non-disabled person whose ability might be here, significantly higher. And so what we're trying to do with a reasonable accommodation of any kind is to help bridge that gap between the non-disabled resident's ability to use and enjoy the home and the disabled person's ability to use and enjoy the home. So with regard to this, HUD released a notice, the FHEO 2020-01 notice. And 2020-01 means it came out in January of last year. What happened immediately thereafter the 2020-01 notice, before people had a chance to really get acquainted with it or even knew it came out? The pandemic ate up your entire abilities last year, right? Your whole bandwidth got eaten up with responding to the pandemic, I'm sure. So many folks around the country I found are unaware that this important guidance from HUD came out. It's the first guidance in 7 years on this topic. And this topic is the #1 complaint topic for HUD. 60% of the complaints HUD receives right now are related to this topic we're discussing today. 60%. It's the #1 HUD complaint. This guidance is...
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
So one of the most common things I've seen in some of these DIY landlord groups, when people are Googling around looking for information, I'll see a DIY landlord do a post and say, hey, and I literally just saw this 2 weeks ago, I had an applicant come to me and she said she had a service animal and I told her we don't accept pets. Is that what I should have done? And then I see a litany of answers of people giving the wrong answers, ranging from, no, it's my house, I don't have to accept a pet, to I don't think you should have done that, and every incorrect answer in between. So I'd like to sort of establish what's at stake here. I guess my question is, so that our viewers watching who maybe for the first time are hearing about this HUD and the real possibility of getting sued, do you have a couple of examples of the dollar amount that some of these lawsuits can result for landlords who are, even if they're unaware and are acting out of innocence and ignorance, what are some of the dollar amounts here that are at stake?
I routinely see 15, 30, 50,000. And I usually conclude the presentation with that, but I'm open to questions. And that's a great one. And that's why it's included in this, because we want people to know, as you said, what is at stake. Remember, you're betting the house on this. Your house, your financial future, your finances, because you will personally be named. And yes, you can and will be sued. So HUD complaint is the first stop usually, but that HUD complaint can get resolved. That HUD can say there is no case there, you can still get sued. So There's a wide range of possibilities of the bad things that can happen to you. And absolutely, if someone says, do you accept service animals? Your response, hopefully everyone will know that after today's presentation, should absolutely not be, we don't accept those. Absolutely not. And for those of you who own smaller quantities, you're the smaller investors, I'll go ahead and get that question for you now. If you have a quadplex and you live in one of those, you can be exempted from many things with regard to the Fair Housing Act. If you have 3 rental properties, as few as 3 rental properties, and you do not use any professional assistance whatsoever in managing or leasing those, you have some exclusions as well. But the minute you use a professional to help you lease or manage any one of those 3, all 3 are covered by the Fair Housing Act. So regardless of either of those situations, I would still follow the Fair Housing Act just to make sure that you are in a great place and a defensible place. So thank you for that, Darcy. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So HUD did release this notice. It's the first language and first recommendations we've heard from them in 7 years. It's got some great stuff in it. We're going to talk about that. Let me share, though, that the guidance is intended to help distinguish between a person with a non-obvious disability with a legitimate need versus a person without a disability who simply wants to have a pet or avoid the pet policies and the costs associated with pets, because pets come with costs, right? And again, this new notice from HUD was released at the time it was, likely because this is 60% of the complaints that they receive. So let's go into the assistance animal, the who and the what, and then after that, we'll hit the HUD part. So on the who side, who is a disabled person? At the root of this, we're talking about a reasonable accommodation for the disabled. What is disabled? Who is disabled? Individuals who are disabled may seek what is referred to as a reasonable accommodation for the disabled, and they have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. That's the definition of a disabled person. HUD also goes on to say this person could have a record of being disabled, be regarded as being disabled, or be obviously, visibly disabled. So somebody wheels in a wheelchair, you know they're a disabled person. Someone comes in with a walking stick and dark glasses, they're disabled. If you're taking an application from someone and you see that they have SSI, disability benefits for themselves, you know they're disabled. Or if they have a housing choice voucher for the disabled, maybe for a veteran, a disabled veteran, you know they're regarded as being disabled, they are disabled. They have passed those other organizations' litmus tests for disability to receive benefits. So they are already regarded and on record as being disabled, right? If not, though, then you're looking at the definition, a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So, and again, they may be requesting a reasonable accommodation. What is reasonable? That is a key question, and it doesn't have a 100% answer, but we're going to endeavor today to give you more answers and less questions. So let's talk about a reasonable accommodation. We all have our own policies. And if you don't have a policy book, as I say that to you, or policy manual, don't worry. You do have a policy manual. It's your move-in documents. Your policy manual is comprised of your move-in documents. Those are your policies with regard to your renters. And in there, you have a pet policy, right? So a reasonable accommodation is a change or exception to a rule, policy, or practice that you are considering making for a person who's disabled, who's requesting a reasonable accommodation to those. And when you set aside any portion of your rules, policies, or practices, you're making a reasonable accommodation for the disabled. And this can include your public and common use spaces. So I often give this discussion to folks who have apartment communities with amenities. And so that's what's meant by that. But this goes to the root of what we do as an industry, ensuring customers can use and enjoy their homes. Specific to that today, we'll be going over reasonable accommodation requests for assistance animals, and you'll hear the word reasonable a lot. So let's hit what is unreasonable. That might be helpful. I can't give you a full-on definition of reasonable, but we'll hit what's unreasonable. When we're talking about accommodations on the whole, not just assistance animals, it's unreasonable if a request creates an undue financial burden. It's unreasonable if a request fundamentally alters your operations. And it is unreasonable if a request presents a direct threat. Of those 3, the direct threat one may be the one that applies to our discussion today, because maybe we have a request for an assistance animal that has a biting history or habit that has been brought to your attention. So that gives you what is not reasonable so that you can kind of juxtapose that against reasonable. When we're teaching this topic, I try to keep things in chunks of 2s or 3s to make it easily absorbable and something that you will retain and easy to take notes on. So in this HUD FHEO notice and previously, you'll come to understand as you dig deeper into this, that you have 2 types of assistance animals. So we have the umbrella, and the umbrella is called assistance animals. And coming down to the points, you have service animals and support animals. And then you have 2 types of legislation on this topic. You have ADA and FHA. And then you have 2 regulatory partners who oversee your compliance with those, DOJ and FHA. So those are the things chunked out that we're going to be talking about, primarily service and support animals and FHA. And you don't want to talk to the HUD, right? Or the DOJ. So we're going to talk about the service and support animals, the ADA and FHA, so that you don't have to talk to the DOJ or the HUD. That's our goal as we're speaking to you today and sharing this from PetScreening. So let's talk about the assistance animal accommodations, the HUD part now. We talked about the who, the what, and now we'll talk about the HUD part. Okay, so this is going to be 3 slides on this, the first notice to come out of HUD on this topic in 7 years. 2013 to 2020 they went without giving us additional guidance. Meanwhile, this soared to 60% of their complaints. So this notice is probably pretty important, right? So let's spend 3 slides on that. That sounds reasonable. This notice has 2 parts. The first part is for housing providers, and it helps assess the requests. The second part is to be used by the requesters. I think that's great. The first part of that is what is needed for us to assess a request. And the second part of it is intended to be given to a medical or healthcare provider to show what information should be included in a letter of support for the request. So again, 2 parts to this notice. We're working with 2s and 3s a lot. You see that? So this notice, first part for the housing providers for us, second part for the requesters. And the requester side has 2 parts. What is needed by us to assess a request and what the medical or healthcare provider should show in a letter to support their request. Again, assistance animals in housing are one of 2 things, service or support. So let's talk about that a little bit more in depth and kind of get into a definition of those. It is super important that you be real clear on what is a service animal, because in the pathways that we can go, which we'll talk about, the service animal pathway is super narrow. You do not get to do very much in this. And this is in accordance with HUD's guidance. So please don't give me a 1 paw rating when we're done because you don't like my message, right? I started off by giving Darcy at least 2 paws, and by the end, she'll be completely up to 5 paws. I just don't know how to do that with 2 hands. So the service animal definition, unless you're in California, that's always a footnote on every seminar. The service animal definition is only a dog trained for a task for the disabled. 3 things again, right? Only a dog trained for a task for the disabled. In California, they have expanded on the Fair Housing Amendments Act and the Fair Housing Act and the rights of those trying to avail themselves of this legislation. And it can be other animals other than a dog. The rest of the country, though, it is only a dog. In either case, it is an animal trained for a task for the disabled, okay? It's really important that you get that one super clear, because with that one, you have very little room to talk about. The support animal side, though, it's other trained or untrained animals that either do work, perform tasks, or provide, you've been waiting for it, therapeutic, fill in the blanks, emotional support, right? ESAs, emotional support animals. So service animals for most of the country, trained dog for a task for the disabled. Support animals are the others. And we'll point out, pets are not a protected class. Certain municipalities and counties around the country have started protecting certain breeds as their animal shelters have been filling up with them. But from a fair housing perspective, pets are not a protected class under any of the legislation we're talking about today, okay? So those are super important. Service animals, except in California, it's a dog trained for a task for the disabled. In California, it could be other animals. Support animals could provide task support, or emotional support. They're trained or untrained, but they're necessary for the disabled to use and enjoy their home more like a non-disabled person. That's the concept. Now let's talk about something that this HUD notice did really great for us. It gave us 2 additional topics to talk about. It gave us a distinction between domestic animals and unique animals, and it gave us definitions for those, and it addressed the multiple animal request. Everybody's had that, right? Put your paws up. They're not catastic. They're not catastic at all. When you get, I have 6 emotional support animals. So we're going to talk to that. This notice provided clarity on the types of household animals, though, and distinguishes them from the unique, which is super important because HUD doesn't always define a whole lot for us, but this time they did. Common household domesticated animals are dogs, cats, small birds, fish, rabbits, hamsters, gerbils, other rodents, fish. I think I mentioned fish twice. I must like them a lot. And the only reptile to make the cut, turtles, right? So those are your domestic household pets. Unique animals, by contrast then, are going to be the reptiles, the barnyard animals, monkeys, etc. But they are non-domesticated animals and they're not traditionally household pets. And with them, the burden increases. That's another good thing in this HUD notice. If someone comes to you and says, I have a support pig, the bar has been raised because that is now a unique animal. It's not under the definition of a domestic animal. So some of the things that they would have to have in their letter from their healthcare provider, they have allergies to domestic animals and can't make use of one of those. And without that animal, the symptoms associated with their disability will be significantly increased. And if it is of a barnyard variety, on the norm, they would have to show that they're applying for a household with a fenced-in yard where they intend to keep the barnyard animal, if it's of the barnyard variety, okay? So that's unique versus domestic. Multiple animal request. Okay, we talked about that earlier and I said 6 emotional support animals, right? We've all been there, we've received those. What this notice says is that we as housing providers have the ability to assess individually for the connection to the disability and that each one offers a distinct need. So if you see someone who is not visibly handicapped, doesn't have a record or isn't regarded as being handicapped or disabled, and you receive a letter from a healthcare provider that says that individual is disabled and the healthcare provider recommends the 6 emotional support dogs, according to this notice, that information alone would not be sufficient. You could determine that that information alone is not sufficient for you while you're considering this reasonable accommodation request to approve it. Because while it did check the box of disabled and it did check the box that there's a connection, it didn't individually assess each animal for an individual and distinct benefit for the requester. So that is a new thing in this HUD notice, and it's quite helpful to all of us. So you have the opportunity to really ask for, not details about the handicap or disability, but to ask for the unique benefit of each animal, okay? Let's look at a little bit more information from the FHEO. We'll cover a few things that we haven't covered before. This one you're going to really love. When people come in and they start waving around that certification card that they got from the internet for their pet because they've gone out and they've gotten that and they've self-declared that they're disabled and that they have a need and they paid their $65 and they got their little identification card and they're coming into your offices and kind of waving those about. This notice says that certifications and registrations from licensing internet providers, absent the interaction of a healthcare provider with personal knowledge of the requester, are not worth the money people spend on them. Now, this is just actually a Starbucks card, but it serves the purpose. So, hey, and if you stump me with a good question at the end, I'll mail it to you, okay? So there's my promise to you and encouragement for you to give us some good Q&As while we're talking today. So please pop some questions in there for the Q&A. So these things, these certificates, we're gonna pretend this has a puppy's picture on it, and registrations, HUD says, are not worth the money spent on them. That they have to be, you have to be receiving information, or you have the right to be receiving reliable information that includes the individual knowledge of the healthcare provider, right? Additionally, in this document, we're getting at a truth and accuracy component of these conversations that have been going on across the country and all around the country. Many of us as providers have said to our clients once or twice, we have a document, put that away. We have a document we require everyone to use because it's consistent. And on that document, it starts off with affidavit, and then there's a legal attestation to truth and accuracy, up to and including penalties of perjury, right? You've all seen those assistance animal forms, and some of us may have provided those to our customers. Some of us may have said these are required to our customers. And HUD says a few things on that. Number one, we can't have any forms that are actually required by the customer. We can offer them our forms to help them, but what we're supposed to do is to ask them at the outset, do you have any documentation that you would like to provide me? If the documentation we authorize or provide to them, or if we're looking at their documentation and saying it's missing a truth and accuracy statement, HUD says something very specific about that. We can require truth and accuracy from these requesters to the same degree that we require it from everyone in the underlying business transaction. What does that mean in real terms? That means there needs to be, if you're going to ask for truth and accuracy in these statements, or if your form has a truth and accuracy attestation on it, your applications need to have that as well, and or your lease packages, right? So because that's the underlying business transaction, this is just a component. So if you require truth and accuracy at the base root of this interaction with these customers, then you can require it here too. What you don't want to do or be seen as doing is raising the bar for the disabled. Does that make sense, Darcy?
Yes, that makes sense. So sort of in layman's terms, what we're saying here is if you have this term on your application, you can have this term on your pet, whatever process you're requiring for the assistive animal proof. But if you don't have an application that has sort of the legalese language at the bottom that requires some of this, you could be opening yourself up to litigation.
Absolutely. Right. Yep. And then FHEO guidelines, the last thing on here I want to share, these guidelines, this FHEO 2020-01 notice, they're not retroactive. So if, like me, you have approved an emotional support snake and been really puzzled by it, like I don't even get that, but that's okay. I didn't have to. It checked the boxes. The person was disabled. The person's healthcare provider said that, this is what this person needs to have a more reasonable opportunity to use and enjoy their home. And so we welcomed those emotional support snakes for years now. This is not retroactive. So if you have those in your communities, you cannot go back and apply this new increased bar for those folks about proving that they have an allergy to domesticated animals and that this animal, this reptile, for instance, is needed for them to avoid dramatic increases in their symptoms associated with their disability. So don't go back and use that unique animal bar raise that we talked about earlier for existing assistance animals that were previously approved before this came out, okay? So it's not retroactive. Now let's talk about the journey, the request journey, its pathways and its components, okay? There are two pathways. There's the pathway for a service animal, and then there's a pathway for support animal. We talked about that service animal pathway being really narrow earlier. So that's why it was so important that you really absorb and retain the definition for a service animal. Unless you're in California, a dog trained for tasks to aid the disabled, right? When you start down this pathway, you are allowed to ask two questions. Is the animal required because of a disability? What work or task has the animal been trained to perform that ameliorates one or more of the symptoms associated with the disability? Think purpose over presence, okay? They have a purpose. Is it necessary because of a disability? What work or task has the animal been trained to perform? And again, other than California, the animal is going to be only a dog. So if you're in Virginia and somebody comes in and says, I have a service pig, that's not a thing in Virginia, okay? So that's the pathway for service animals. I know that that's rough. And we talked earlier, you're not allowed to give me a 1-paw rating for that because I'm delivering the message. So support animals, though, the good news is this is a much wider pathway where we get to do our due diligence and we're allowed. So for the support animal, the request pathway is, number one, is this animal for a known or documented disability related need? And number two, does this animal do work or perform tasks or provide therapeutic emotional support? And is it a domesticated animal? So that's how we get down the support animal pathway if those answers are yes. What are the components of a support animal request? Is the disability obvious? Can you see it? You see my graphic that explains what we're talking about. Is the disability observable, or are they known to be disabled? Remember what we talked about earlier. Observable, obviously we know what that is. Known or regarded as being disabled may mean that they're receiving financial benefits for the disabled, like SSI, Medicare, Veterans Disability Benefits, or they may even have a HAP voucher for their disability. If none of those proves to be true, HUD says one reliable form of documentation is a note from a person's healthcare professional that confirms a person's disability, and their disability is affecting a major life activity, remember, and a related need for an assistance animal for therapeutic purposes. When the healthcare professional, this is key, has personal knowledge of the individual. That's a HUD quote. Personal knowledge of the individual. And that's really key. Part 2 of the component is the connection between the request and the disability. Nexus is the term that we use when we're talking about this. Courts have said the accommodation must be necessary to facilitate a disabled person's individual ability to function. Imagine that we have the opportunity while we're considering these, this is me stepping back into grace for a moment, to help someone truly function by the accommodation request that we're considering for them. Function. We are housing providers. We want our customers to be able to function. So at its purest form, stepping back into that grace for a moment, the accommodation must be necessary to facilitate a disabled person's individual ability to function. And the concept of necessity requires, at a minimum, this is what HUD says, the showing that the desired accommodation will affirmatively enhance a disabled person's quality of life. Quality of life. We can help people function, and we can help them with their quality of life if we do this work properly and well, right? And we can protect our owners and our other residents as well sometimes when we do it well. So that's the request component for both the service animal and the support animal. Let's talk about the journey and the process and outcomes. So the request process. Number 1, we are required by law to consider every request that comes our way. I don't care how ridiculous it is. You're required by law to consider every request that comes across your desk for reasonable accommodation for the disabled as relates to their disability for a service or support animal. Okay? Duty to consider all requests, not to approve them necessarily, but to consider them. It's advisable to reference an interactive process with your requesters when you're talking to them, and to know that that means that that is you and they engaging in a good faith dialogue. Okay? With the individual making the request, you and they both are interactive and you're having a good faith dialogue. Can we require a particular form or format of the request? We talked about that earlier. We absolutely cannot require a particular form or format of the request. We're entitled to reliable documentation from a healthcare professional with personal knowledge. Reliable documentation from a healthcare provider with personal knowledge. Okay, so we continue to work on the 2s and 3s. This is really, many of these things can be explained with 2 or 3 components. So it's really not that complex. And I hope that you're providing your information so that you get the workbook, because it's super important and it's a great resource literally to print and have at your have handy at the ready for you. So requesting disability information, can we request that? That's a big no. We cannot ask any questions about someone's disability. We all are aware of HIPAA, and we all know that people's personal medical information is just that, personal. Okay? So we have the paperwork. What now? HUD says our best practice involves being able to give a response to this request within 10 days. That's what's in their notice. None of us want 10 days of vacancy, so we're going to move a little bit quicker than that, I'm sure. But that's what HUD says is the best practice. What are the next steps, though? Let's talk about that. In your organization, are you the last stop where you're going to approve or deny this? Or are you a frontline team member who has to package this information up and forward it along to the person in your organization who will approve or deny it? So that answer is going to determine, of course, what you're doing next. But let's say you're offering approval or denial, okay? If the disability is not obvious, evaluate the documentation. Does the documentation say that the individual is disabled? Does the documentation look reliable? Does the request look reasonable? Are they asking for 6 emotional support animals? Okay. Where does the reasonable line cross? We said certainly earlier, one of the 3 definitions of unreasonable would be posing a serious risk. So if in your communication with somebody about an assistance or service dog or support or service dog, they reveal to you the dog has a bite history, that right there is not reasonable. Okay. And that is grounds for you to deny. But again, you're looking at the disability, the request, that those 2 have been connected, and that it is reasonable. And what are your options? Approve or reject, or continue the interactive process. I really like that one for individual providers because it leaves you room to continue to move forward. And it demonstrates for HUD or other regulatory partners that you did present a willingness to move forward. So let's say somebody comes in and they've got that dog and they have told you that the dog has a bite history, and that's why the dog has a strap around its nose. At the end of the day, you're likely to say to them, I'm so sorry, I'm going to be unable to approve. That dog is a reasonable accommodation because it poses a direct threat. However, I would like to continue the interactive process with you. Are there any other animals that could help you and be a reasonable accommodation for your disability that do not present a direct threat? And then you are on it. And that's why you're going to want the workbook, and you're going to want to print that out and keep it handy, okay? Because those words will keep you very safe. I have been there, done that. And I've had people in the middle of this consideration process cut us off and go to HUD, or in our case here in South Carolina Human Affairs Commission. I was able to turn around and say to the Human Affairs Commission, I don't know why they contacted you. We were in the middle of an interactive process. They cut that process short. I didn't tell them to remove the animal. They cut the process short. They complained to you. They didn't like the process. They gave me documentation that was unreliable, illegible, didn't fit what we're allowed to have or expect. And I asked them to continue the interactive dialogue, and they cut it off. So those are great words for you to use and live by. So make sure you're printing this out and have it handy, okay? So if you're going to deny the request, again, the customer is not documented as being disabled or known as being disabled. The request does not appear reasonable or related to their disability. It could present a direct threat, as we've said. So you can, at that point, again, this is not legal advice. Anyone can sue for anything. I have had many HUD complaints. Fortunately, only one ever had to be conciliated, and it was on this topic. So I've learned the hard way, and I'm sharing with you what I've learned. But at that point, if it were I would deny that request, and then I would also say to them, can we continue the interactive dialogue and the interactive process about an alternative accommodation? Again, that's always going to be helpful to you. If you've decided everything looks in order and you want to move in that possum assistance animal, right? Move that assistance animal in, but remember, do not then start treating them as a pet. There are no fees, there are no rents, there are no deposits for this animal, okay? And therein lie the accommodation. We're allowing this animal to be moved in, and we are not following our pet policies. Don't even have them sign a pet addendum, please. Have them sign an assistance animal addendum. Don't have them anywhere in print signing anything that talks about a pet. Okay, it's not a pet. Because of that, we set aside our pet rules and view these animals differently. Think of them as a wheelchair, a walker, a cane. Don't think of them in any form as a pet. Obtain the information on these animals for safety's sake, their rabies vaccinations and things of that nature. Secure all the documentation and obtain and store and track those health records, like I said. And to Darcy's great question as we started out, I always close on this note: the monetary settlements can be painful, 15, 30, 50. And that's not even the bulk of the problem. It's time and treasure. Your time is worth money. That's why you decided to do what you're doing, right? And it's these settlements, and it's your attorney's fees, and it can be their attorney's fees as well. So multiply those. It's time and treasure. So whatever you do, do the right thing, demonstrate best practices. If you have a complaint, you want it to be for a mistake. Like the one I had to conciliate, it cost $1,800. It was a mistake. And I learned my lesson, and that wasn't a terribly expensive lesson. It was okay. Haven't done that again. And now I teach classes, right? And that was the only one in my career that ever made it across that line. So I'm sharing that with you boldly so that it doesn't happen to you. Also like to offer you guys additional resources in addition to the handbook. We have a pet policies and amenities report in multifamily. That's a great report. There's also a HUD fact sheet on this notice. If you Google HUD fact sheet notice FHEO 2020-01, like you see on the screen, you'll find that in a jiffy. There's also a HUD memo on the insurance policy question. I'm often asked during these presentations, what if my insurance company prohibits pit bulls, German shepherds, Rottweilers, and those are the dogs that I keep receiving accommodation requests for? I can't allow them in. My my insurance provider rather will drop me. That is not going to be a viable answer on your part. Go read that HUD FHEO insurance policies restrictions as a defense for refusals to make a reasonable accommodation memo. If you Google those words, you'll go right to it again. HUD got real serious on that quite a number of years ago, and they're not having it. If you have a particular question on this topic, I welcome that. It's always a learning opportunity for me as well, and I can be reached at victoria@petscreening.com. Before we go, though, I want to share just 2 slides with you about pet screening, and then we'll go into your any questions that you all might have. Pet screening is how I'm able to be here with you all today and all over the country. Monday, I'll be giving this chat in person in Tennessee. It's going to be my first in-person chat or session. So we're giving these sessions all over the country, and I thank Pet Screening, for whom I'm the Director of Education and Outreach. And I also have fun orchestrating and working with accounts. So we provide a whole bevy of services. Today, I wanted you to be more informed and confident and graceful in this topic. But I'm going to conclude by telling you, I want you to be more successful and happy in your work. And I want you to not do any of the things we've talked about today. I want you to just say, Pet Screening can do all that for me for free and just send all the work to us. I want you to understand what's going on. Even our clients who use us should understand everything we've talked about today, but they shouldn't spend their time doing this work. We were created to help pet-friendly housing providers. We want you to understand the risks associated with all the pets and animals coming into your rental properties. We want to help you generate more revenue for yourself and your owners. And we offer 3 profiles so that every customer you interact with can check this box on petscreening.com and can have a profile that helps keep all of this information on pets and animals in one place for you. We have the no pet profile that kind of locks that back door for people to say, well, I didn't know. We have the household pet profiles, and we have assistance animal profiles. And when a requester begins the assistance animal profile process, we take over, we receive the information and documentation, we review it, and if it looks good, we authenticate it. We contact that healthcare provider and we authenticate that document was actually provided by that provider for that requester. Everything we do is centralized, digitized, and we have our documents and servers mapped to a HIPAA security rule. Super easy to set up. We can do 2-way APIs with some property management systems. We can do flat file integrations, or you can run this entirely not integrated, and it's super, super simple. No contract, no invoices, everything's free to you. So we want you to be more informed and confident and graceful in this work, but then we want you to give it to us. So, Darcy, that is the presentation I wanted to offer to your folks, your guests, but I do want to conclude by reminding everybody there's more than 40 million people living with disabilities. That's an incredible number. Vision, hearing, cognitive, and ambulatory. Translate those numbers to your rental properties. How many of your renters are in this category? Be prepared to serve them while also understanding the laws that are meant to serve them and to do so gracefully. Firmly follow the law and the HUD notice on this topic to also aid the disabled by not turning a blind eye. We're underserving the disabled if we just pop these documents in files and run screaming scared in the other direction. Remember, follow the law, follow the notice, follow the process. You're betting your house on your understanding of how to do so. Darcy, back to you.
All right. Wow, Victoria, that was so much incredible information. For all of you listening and watching, your heads are probably spinning from all of these knowledge bombs that just came your way. So a couple of things before we jump into Q&A that I wanted to just reiterate for our audience that you touched on, Victoria.
Sure.
The first one is if you are a mom and pop landlord, you can be held responsible for the actions of, let's say you have a friend who you said, oh, my friend is going to lease my property. Or let's say your realtor offered to do it for free. In our market, we do see a lot of realtors because they're coming from a great place, right? They want to be helping their clients. They say, no problem, I'll do your rental for free. Well, as a landlord, you are in the landlord business, right? And if you followed us at all, you know this is one of the major premises we teach, that stepping in, owning a rental is stepping into being in the landlord business. So if you make the decision to have a friend or your handyman or handy woman or realtor rent your property for you, you have an obligation to make sure that person acting on your behalf understands these rules, because one quick slip of the tongue, sort of like I referenced with my question before, can be the root of one of these lawsuits that ends up in this $15,000 or $50,000 scenarios with HUD. And this isn't like a scare tactic. This is a real thing that is really talked about a lot in our industry at a professional level. But really, from looking at all these DIY landlord forums that we follow, it is not knowledge that the everyday mom and pop landlord has. So I want to make sure you all really understand and take to heart what is at stake here with everything we just learned today.
Absolutely. You encompass that perfectly. You own property, you have to follow these laws. There are very, very few exceptions. And if you step outside of them, you lose the exception. So it's just better to know what's going on with the Fair Housing Act and the Fair Housing Amendments Act, and to follow these rules and this legislation and the HUD guidance. It really is just best to go there. If you live in a quadplex and you own the quadplex and you live in the quadplex, you have some exemptions. If you own 3 or fewer houses, you have some exemptions, but you can easily trigger the loss of those. So just follow the Fair Housing Act and the Fair Housing Amendments Act and be safe.
For sure.
And make sure anyone, to your point, Darcy, your really good point, you have to make sure anyone who works with you or for you does as well. Because when the HUD complaint comes in, if you have your next door neighbor, Jane, keeping an eye on your rental because you're going out of town, Jane's name is going to be on there, as is going to be your name. And it's going to be everybody up the food chain. So everyone's name is going to be on there. And again, we're betting the house on this.
You get a lawsuit, and you get a lawsuit, and you get a lawsuit. And you know what?
That's not all.
The name of the game in the rental business, but prevention is 9/10 of the law. So what we want you to really take away from today, even if you don't remember everything, hopefully you do go download that booklet. Even if you don't look at it today, keep it for when it comes up. And hopefully one of your takeaways from today can be when someone comes to you and starts using some of these words, assistive animal, service animal, they may not use the right lingo. They may be throwing incorrect terms at you. That doesn't stop your obligation from following basically this process that needs to be set up of answering these questions. But hopefully you can at least take away from today, trigger, oh, wait a minute, I can't say no. I need to go back and revisit my notes for how I need to handle processing this application.
That's where the workbook comes in. And for years, I tried hundreds of cases as a landlord, because here in South Carolina, we can represent our owners without an attorney, eviction cases and whatnot. I literally tried hundreds of cases, hundreds. But I never went into that room without my legal handbook for the state of South Carolina. Never. So documentation, 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 education, education, education. So I see we have a few questions in the chat. Darcy, are you going to moderate some of those for us?
Yep. So we have a question from Sherry, and she's asking, how does pet screening get paid if it's free for landlords? Okay, that's a great question, right? If it sounds too good to be true, like what is this snake oil we're trying to sell you here? I will tell you guys, the reason we have pet screening on today is because as a professional company in our property management company, we've been using pet screening for years for all these reasons. We as professionals have an above average understanding of this, but it is so much easier to outsource it. So we use pet screening. Quick disclaimer, we are not making any referral fees. We are not sponsors or anything of pet screening, so we get nothing out of recommending them. We are just letting you know because they are such an incredible resource. Victoria, do you want to answer how it is that pet screening makes its money?
Absolutely. And thank you for that great question, Sherry. So our services are free to you, our property management clients. We offer those 3 profiles and all the work associated with processing those and storing those. We charge the pet owners, only the pet owners. So if Susan is going to move into your property and Susan has 2 dogs, Susan, as she creates her pet profiles, is going to pay $20 for her first dog, $15 for her second dog to go through pet screening, right? In this industry, we screen our residents. We're now screening their furry family members too. And that is native to this industry. And somebody says to me, often asks me on these calls, do you get any pushback to the $20 or the $15 or the annual renewal of $10? And my answer to that is no. I have a dog toy by my front door that costs me at least $20, and I don't even own a dog. It's for me to play with the dog across the street. Pet enthusiasts are not going to have a problem, or pet parents, if you will, paying $20 or $15, because not only are they going to get their screening done, they're also going to have a product. So they get their pet screened and they have a pet product. And it's a digital record for them of all the information associated with their pets, a digital pet passport. And so we know with, Elsa coming through, that sometimes people leave their homes in a hurry with their pets. Well, now, because of these, all of our electronics, are going to leave with all their pets' digital health and care information as well. So they can use that for Airbnb, WAG, Rover, new groomers. So they're paying us, and they're the only ones paying us. The pet owner, $20 for the first pet, $15 for the second, and then $10 annual renewals. They get their digital pet passport, and it gets renewed each year. And you get all of the profile information about their pets. And you also get a FIDO, like a FIDO score for each one of their pets. And you get to see all the answers to their pet parenting questions. So you get to really understand for the first time in this industry the risks associated with each pet. We ask those same questions of assistance animal owners too. So you won't get a FIDO score for those, but you will be able to see the risks associated with those animals as well, and understand if maybe one poses a direct threat with a bite history, because those questions are in our 21 pet parenting answers or our assistance animal answers. Great question, Sherry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, pet screening is the go-to resource in the industry, because this is not an uncomplicated topic. But we do want to be clear, mom and pop landlords are eligible. And that was one of my big questions before bringing pet screening on, because I know we can use it at an industry level, but can mom and pop landlords use it? So you can. Or if you're a property manager and maybe you just do it for 5 to 10 properties, you can still set up your account. So it's just such an awesome CYA tool to have in your back pocket. Or if you're a realtor doing it and representing rentals, but you're actually, your focus is on sales, this is definitely something you would want to consider. Okay.
And I have Beth on the call with us today, I believe, and you can reach Beth at PetScreening.com. And Beth often works with the smaller owners, and she's a resource, and she'll be happy to, she's going to be able to give this session before long. She's been on so many of these with me, but she is your resource for the smaller landlord owners. And it's, again, Beth at PetScreening.com.
Okay, awesome. All right, we have another question from Janine. She says, you mentioned the insurance issue. And if your insurance says no dangerous dogs, that isn't reason not to refuse an assistance dog. What do you do in this case? Do you have to accept it and then try to find an insurance company that will accept it? That's a good question.
That's a good point. And if you are going to, and I'm going to kind of answer this backwards, if you look up that HUD memo, they literally are going to tell you that if that is going to be your defense to deny that animal, that you're going to have to prove to them that you had no other insurance available to you other than the one that has this breed restriction in it, and that your insurance provider would drop you. And so you're going to have to show them that you went out on the market looking for other insurance providers, and they specifically told you, even for an assistance animal, service or support, that you would lose your insurance, that they wouldn't insure you, that there is no other option for you out there. And you know that's not going to be the case. So essentially HUD knocked your legs out from underneath you and said, we're not having it. And if we get down to the point where the insurance companies don't get on board and understand that this is a federal civil right that they cannot take away from people, if need be, we'll sue some of these insurance providers too. So HUD is really serious about that. So if you have an insurance company and you believe for a service animal, they would tell you that you will lose your coverage, then you need to find other insurance. Absolutely. Because an insurance company cannot take people's federal civil rights away from them.
And I will say, this is probably one of the most common things we have seen come up in our portfolio is that people are really stumped about this, right? People, it's an easy way for a prospective tenant to try to bring a pit bull in if you're saying
Yeah.
no pit bull, right? Assuming
Mhm.
they can get the doctor who, like you said, the burden of proof has been raised just a little bit. That doctor has to have a personal knowledge of this applicant. It can no longer just be these certificates from the internet. So that was a win for the industry that happened at the beginning of 2020. Like you said, it got swept under the rug with everything else that happened in 2020. But that is one of the most common issues we've seen in our portfolio, which are generally $1 million to $3 million homes, as people are trying to get the pit bulls or other vicious dogs in that way. And the homeowners are concerned because they say, my policy won't allow this. And one thing we do see here in California is it can be very difficult for homeowners to get insurance right now because of all the fire issues. So there are homes that cannot get insurance. So to have to change an insurance policy on a higher end home in a fire zone is actually kind of a big deal. So
Yeah.
I could say if something like that were happening, it sounds like you have two outs potentially. One is you could point to some of these links to your insurance company and say, you sure you're going to drop me over this? And the other thing would be to create that paper trail that shows you are actually having an unreasonable business burden yourself because you literally can't get insurance otherwise because of this high fire zone issue, or whatever the equivalent. Maybe you live in a big flood zone or hurricane, whatever your equivalent is in your area. But it
Yeah,
would, I
be
think,
prepared.
the way is do your paper trail if you have to go that route.
Yeah, paper trail, because HUD has basically said for, gosh, 7 or 8 years now, I think that came out ago, that they are willing to get down in the dirt on this one, and you're going to have to prove it's essentially guilty until proven innocent, and you're going to have to rely on your paper trail to prove you innocent. So be very cautious. And Darcy, you made a great point. Send that HUD memo to your insurance provider and ask them if they're going to put it in writing that they expect you to invalidate the federal civil rights of the disabled who would rent your property, and ask them to put that in writing. So,
who
and
otherwise who otherwise qualify, right? And that's a question that I have. Let's say you have an applicant, they submit their application and they don't meet your published qualifying standards, right? So ours is a 700 minimum FICO. Let's say this applicant has a 640. They don't qualify, but they also have this assistive animal and they are trying to get approved. Now, let's say you deny them because they don't meet your credit standards, and now they're trying to bring a claim against you saying you denied me because of my assistive animal. Do you see anything in here that gives you pause for concern that if you have an applicant who is disabled and claiming assistive animal, that you would need to do anything unusual against your regular day-to-day protocol when denying this applicant?
so I think that's a great question again, Darcy. And I think the answer lies in how you convey that their application has not been accepted. We all know that if you provide a declination to somebody because their credit is insufficient, that you have a letter that you have to send to them that you've made this judgment based upon their credit. And so you're going to have that letter. Being a proper operator, you're going to have the letter that you have sent them that says we relied on the credit information provided by one of the three biggies, and we're sending you this information. This decision was made based upon your credit. You have a right to a free copy of your credit. That whole letter, we all know about that letter. So you're going to send that letter. You're not going to finish the assistance animal accommodation review process because it's a moot point. And so you're going to have the declination, you're going to have the credit records. Anyone can file a complaint for anything, just like the ones that I have had in the past who have cut off the interactive process when we weren't done. They were not given a declination, and then they went and filed a HUD complaint. So anyone can sue for anything. It's all about what have you done? Is it in compliance with HUD regulations? And have you documented? That's really the key.
Yeah, so this is just one more example why having pre-established, published application guidelines for which you as a landlord, even if you only own one property, which you set up are your qualifying guidelines. Because if you don't have that, and let's say in this same instance, you denied this person with this 640 score, but you don't have anything published and you don't even know whether you would take the next person with the 640, well, guess what? You get a lawsuit, you get a lawsuit, you get a lawsuit because
And a
you
free set of steak knives.
yeah.
And a free set of steak knives.
Yeah. And we see this, guys. I hope you're hearing me. Are you hearing me? We see this in the free landlord groups when people are out there Googling, taking the crowdsource answers, and we see all the wrong answers associated with this. Should I take here's what I see in the landlord forums. Here's this profile who applied to my property, and here's this profile, and this person's a nurse, and these people are a young family with these kids, and who should I take? And I want to pull my hair out. I'm like, whoa, what are you guys doing? Do you know how dangerous this is? And then everyone in the forum pops in, every Tom, Dick, and Jerry pops in with their, I should add a girl's name. Linda pops in with their opinion. And all you are doing is crowdsourcing your way straight to a lawsuit. So again, if you follow us at all, you know we preach on this topic. When you become a landlord, the day you sign on that dotted line, you enter into the landlord business. And to be successful, to avoid these lawsuits, you must set your property up like a business. And if you are a real estate agent or you are a casual property manager and anyway touching properties on behalf of other people, you have a moral and legal obligation to know all this stuff. So we commend all of you for joining us here for today. We've gone over the hour. We've had so much to talk about. If there's a question we did not get to, Victoria gave you her email. You all have this invitation from our various emails. You can hit us up if you are in our private landlord coaching Facebook group. You can hit us up with questions there. Again, we do have the free download. I think I saw someone asking in one of the comments if she missed the download. So there is a link if you've joined us either on Zoom or Facebook. It's in the top. And if you are watching us on the recording after the fact, we'll have it in the show notes. The link for you to download this 47-page workbook that PetScreening so graciously has provided for us, that not only goes through this whole slide deck today, but also gives you some more step-by-step guidance on the topic. So when you are faced with it, you don't have to have that deer in headlights. Even if you don't remember, you just got to be like, wait, I can't say no. I need to go check my stuff.
Right. Yeah, just press pause.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to try to remember that. Just press pause.
Just press pause, go look for the information. But again, this is all about you all being informed and feeling confident. You can be informed and confident about how air conditionings work, but you don't want to be your own air conditioner repair person, right? You don't want to lay your own carpet and your own vinyl. We outsource a lot in this industry. We want to understand what we're talking about, but then we want to spend our critical time doing the things that give us the biggest ROI. This is not an ROI necessarily when you're working with assistance animal accommodation requests. You can avoid a payout, but it's certainly not a return on investment. So work on that which gives you returns and let us handle this for you. So Victoria at PetScreening.com, or if you're looking to sign up and you're a smaller provider with critically important rental housing to you and your family, Beth at PetScreening.com or Angelique at PetScreening.com. You might find it easier to remember the Beth at PetScreening.com though.
Or they can just go to PetScreening.com. They'll work their way through the ranks.
They'll get to us.
In the right place. They're super friendly, super responsive on the chat. Guys, coming up next week, we are so excited about the Rental Rescue Show. We are bringing in Kurt Bullock, who is an industry pro in insurance. We are talking about slip and fall accidents. Is your homeowner's umbrella policy enough? Landlord insurance policies, are they going to cover you? And I'm going to bet we're going to piggyback on some of these topics when it gets into dog bites. What happens if one of these assistive pit bull animals bites someone, right? Which is why you might not be wanting. What do you do then? Can you get them out of the property? Can you do this? Is your insurance covering it? Is your tenant's insurance covering it? Especially if you can't make them get extra insurance because they've met the disabled requirement. So we're covering all that stuff next week. It is going to be a juicy one. We will be here at the same time, Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And you can always catch us on the replay on Facebook at The Landlord Code. You can catch us at thelandlordcode.com, where we have our beta course launch open only until July 19th. We are going to be going live beta launch through our course for the very first time. For those of you who are ready to step up, get serious about your landlord business, get serious about making this passive money without all this pain and confusion about what you're supposed to do or not supposed to do. We've got a few seats left for that. So if you are interested, we would love to see you, and we will be continuing to offer you meaty topics, useful topics just like this. Victoria, so grateful for having you today. We appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Everybody else, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you, Darcy. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.